Alrighty. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, someone's already in the chat. That's very fast. Sorry for the wait to anyone who's been waiting. I'm a little bit late tonight. It's been a weird day. I'll just say that. But we're going to get started with yesterlore today. I just need to get one more thing set up. Alright, so today, actually I do have one more thing to set up, sorry. I forgot about something. But I can keep talking as I'm doing this, hopefully. Today, I have planned to do 2 more stanzas. I know before I said I was hoping to get a bunch done this time, but my schedule has been a little weird this past week, and also next week is going to be weird. Although I'm hoping that yesterlore will be unaffected by next week's schedule weirdness. But today is affected a little bit. So we're only going to do 2 stanzas. I have, like last time, I have a comment to say about a prior stanza, the one we did last week, and then we'll do 2 more. So I just need to get this other thing set up. But while I'm doing that, sorry, I'm gonna explain what my plan is. Continuing yesterlore. So I have said several times I plan on doing the Old English rune poem, and then after that I'm going to move on to the Norwegian and Icelandic rune poems. I'm not sure what order I want to do them in yet, but I think I definitely will do those rune poems when we're done with the Old English one. However, we've been doing a lot of rune poetry for many, many weeks now, because this rune poetry lasted quite a long time, longer than I actually expected it to, which is not a complaint. I'm very glad that we've had so many weeks doing this rune poem. I love the Old English rune poem. So definitely no complaints from me about that. But I think it might be fun to take a break, not just from rune poetry, but Old English in general, just because we've had so many weeks in a row of Old English. We started with a bunch of Old English. We took a break from that a little bit. We did some Ancient Egyptian, and we did some Ancient Greek, and then we moved back to Old English again, and we've been doing that for quite some time. So I think it might be fun to take a break from Old English. Once we're done with the Old English rune poem, obviously we're going to move on to Old Norse stuff, but it's still rune poetry. So I think one thing that might be fun to do is I might do an interim week, or maybe 2, between the rune poems, where we look at something else. And my idea is I want to look at some Gothic stuff, because partially I'm just biased. I really love Gothic, the language. It's, I think, an understudied Germanic language, in my opinion. But there is a lot of interest in Gothic coming from a lot of different places. And so I would really like to read some Gothic. Now, virtually all, there's some other inscriptions that are not in this category, but most of the Gothic inscriptions writing that we have any evidence of is biblical, translation of the Bible. So that's our main Gothic text. It's Wulfila's Bible. There's some other Gothic stuff that we could look at, although a lot of it is kind of harder to parse, because some of it is like non-standard spelling compared to the standard set by this one scribe who translated the Bible for us. So I think I want to pick some sections from the Gothic Bible to read, just to show people what Gothic is like. Gothic is a really cool language, and I want to pick some interesting stuff to translate into, the interesting stuff from the Gothic translation to share, because Gothic is really cool, I must say. So that is what I am planning to do. Once we finish the Old English rune poem, we take a break from rune poetry and do some Gothic Bible stuff, and then we come back to rune poetry, either Norwegian or Icelandic. I'm, again, not sure what I want to do. Oh, Toki, too, someone in the chat who just came up. I got a few people in the chat saying hello. Hello. Um, okay. Wow. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna read these 2 stanzas. We're just gonna do 2 more, and I have two sort of preliminary things before that I want to get to. First is I want to highlight a really cool resource that was shared recently by a very cool person. And I'm just going to share it on the screen. I think that would be cool. So there is this website here. I'm going to paste the URL into the description of the YouTube upload of this. I'm also going to put it in the chat right now for anyone who's in the chat who wants to see. It's called The Runes of the Old English Rune Poem. And it is an excellent resource that goes into each rune in depth, each stanza. It includes sort of scholarly analysis, as well as some sort of personal interpretation. So you get some stuff that I'm not really doing here. I'm slowly working through it myself. Yeah, me too. I actually haven't read all of them yet because they're very in-depth. I'm still like in the first group here in terms of reading them all. But yeah, each one goes into great depth. So we can go to the first rune stanza that we read, eþel. And here they have Old English that we read together. There's a translation. It's an old translation. And then there's lots of discussion. So different scholarly opinions and then personal interpretation, comparison to the other rune poems. It's very in-depth. So I definitely recommend checking out this website. Like I said, it will be posted in the description of the YouTube upload after this stream. And you can see it there in the chat if you're watching right now. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight. The second thing I wanted to talk about is going back to the last stanza we did last time. I think I should zoom in a little bit. I think I'm usually zoomed in a bit more than this anyway. Before I leave this website, actually, there's one more thing I wanted to say about it. In addition to these amazing analyses of each rune stanza, there's also other resources that you see here. There's a list of other articles written here that go into the history of runes, history of runic divination, lots of really cool information sources. I very much recommend checking this site out if you're enjoying or interested in rune poetry and runes in general. I just realized I forgot to get the rune poem facsimile open. Actually, I'm just going to go to the index. I like to have Hicks's version of this to compare as we look. So I'm going to get that open. Oh, there's like 3 versions of this open. I want to go to... Why don't I just search rune, huh? There we go. I like the facsimile, thank you. There we go. It's taking a minute. This is just in case we need to look at his version. Turn that off and zoom in. There we go. And we are down here. So last week we read Ing. That was our last stanza. I want to zoom in more here. So we read Ing west adest mid ast denum iso in sedron, etc. And what we talked about last time, there was a lot to say about this stanza. I had many notes. One of the things I brought up, I'm sorry, I'm recentering it a little bit, is that this word wine here, wine, often sort of amended or interpreted as a dialectal variation of this word wine, means wagon. And one interpretation of that is the Big Dipper. What I forgot to mention when I was talking about that is that Ing sometimes himself, there's been a few suggestions of this, might be being analogized to the constellation Boötes. And here's Boötes. I hope that's not getting super cut up. There we go. Boötes the plowman is here. And then here's this part of Ursa Major here is the Big Dipper, the wine, the plow. So some people have interpreted like this constellation is Ing himself, and then this is the wagon, because it says that the wagon ran after the wagon. We talked about those different possible interpretations last time. So that's the last thing I wanted to say about Ing that we finished last week. All right. So without further ado, 20 minutes into what is usually our stream time, I'm actually going to get into our new stanzas for the day. Okay, so our first stanza here is eþel, and I'm so sorry, but there's more I have to say before we get into this rune here. We have something I wanted to say about this rune is that this rune, or rather more often than not a variation of this rune, has been used by Nazis and continues to be used by neo-Nazis. So that's something to be aware of. Oh no, I just lost the chat. Give me 1 second. I lost the chat doc. This is not good. Oh, that's weird. There we go. Alright, the chat is back. Sorry. I just lost you all for a second. Okay. The thing I wanted to point out about this rune here is sometimes you will see, hopefully you won't actually, hopefully you will not see this, but if you do see this rune, I'm going to make it zoomed in a bit more. This rune, but actually I would like to make this a bigger font too, maybe that'll be easier to see. Yeah, the person who spoke in the chat, that's exactly what I'm talking about, yeah. Isn't that the one they typically use, the one with the little feet? I'm usually sus of anyone that uses that on their social media though, like in their profile picture. Yeah, yeah, honestly, even if it's just this rune by itself with no other context, or like the context that they're talking about runes in general, or doing runic divination or something, the rune by itself could be, you know, you're just talking about the runes in a wider context. But if it's just this rune alone, but also particularly if there's like little, like Narcy puts it, little feet, like serifs that come up at an angle from either side, sort of making it look more like it's like a loop, but boxed. I wish I could draw on here, but it's a Google Doc, so I can't do that. But basically like a little sort of foot, but way smaller, coming up that way and that way on the bottom. That is just very explicitly a Nazi symbol. There were like SS divisions, or at least one SS division used it as their symbol, like their banner, and it continues to be used by neo-Nazis. So that's definitely one to keep a lookout for. I've been pointing out the ones to keep a lookout for as we've been going, and this is unfortunately another one to be careful about. And part of the reason we'll see is their interpretation, like the sort of Nazi-ist folkish interpretation of this rune. Someone said, I used to use it as a logo when I was younger on Vampire Freaks. I was very neglectful of the connotations it has with it. Somewhere the amount of Nazism and heathenry and rune lore at the time, for instance. Yeah, it's really easy to make that mistake, because if you just look at it, if you're new to runes, and you see this rune, this is a cool looking rune, right? Probably comes from the Greek letter omega, right? Well, what? Why is it doing that? There we go. No, I wanted a capital. Whoops. There we go. Probably comes from this Greek letter, omega. It's a pretty cool looking letter. Ultimately, there's a lot of debate about whether the runes came directly from Greek or Etruscan or some other old italic script. I think Jackson Crawford recently did a video about that too. You could check out. Like, where do the runes come from? Well, not where do the runes come from, but do they come from Greek or Etruscan? Very new to runes, and my first book was by Ralph Bloom. So that's not bad. Yeah, Ralph Bloom. I don't think I've mentioned him before here, but he is like a more contemporary source. By contemporary, I mean like I think he wrote in the 1980s. I think he was an anthropologist, and he did some interpretations of runes that is kind of the actual main source for a lot of rune books you see nowadays, especially in like sort of magical or occult sections of bookstores. When you see rune lore books, he's actually the ultimate source of a lot of the takes that you see on runes in there in terms of how people do divination. And it tends to be not wholly divorced from what we see in the rune poems, but it's kind of his own interpretation, and he kind of adds a sort of tarot-ish vibe to them, which isn't a bad thing. Obviously, I'm not going to judge that. It's just that's really the source that a lot of contemporary books you'll see on runes is coming from, and not actually the rune poems that we've been looking at. So I think it's really easy to just think this is a cool looking rune, and maybe not be aware of some of the connotations. That's why I'm trying to point those out as we go. All right, so again, we're gonna finally get to the stanza eventually. I promise. I think we can now get into reading it. So as per usual, I'm gonna start in Old English. We're not going to translate the first word until the end. We're going to talk about the stanza, and then we'll talk about what interpretation we could have of this rune's name. Yeah, someone said, speaking of rune poems, it's actually refreshing to see someone focusing on rune poems. Yeah, we've been doing this every week for the last few weeks, and when we're done with the Old English one, we are going to take a break, do some Gothic Bible stuff, and then probably for like just a week, maybe 2 weeks. I'm hoping just a week. And then we'll go into the Norwegian and Icelandic rune poem after that. So yeah, we're doing rune poems for a while. So yeah. And the previous ones are all on YouTube as well, if you missed those. So I'm going to finally get to the stanza, eþel, and I'm going to read it. Eþel byth over leof, eihulkum men, Gif hemot thar richtest an Jerusalem on, brukan on boldum, brukan on bolda, sorry, an bladum oftast. There we go. So, I'm trying to see if I have any emendation notes in terms of what's in the manuscript. I'm going to look at the manuscript we have from Hicks here. Yeah, no, I don't think I have any notes other than this word Jerusalem. This is maybe this is maybe I'm not even going to say maybe. I'm like very confident that this is a form of the verb yerizan, which is usually written with an I because it's a long I, but it would be short in this environment, I think. And when I is short in these later dialects of Old English, typically it can get like spelled with a Y instead. That kind of thing happens a lot in later dialects of Old English that are in the sort of West Saxony area here. So let's go into the translation here. Eþel byth over leof. We're going to skip eþel. We're going to do that at the end. We're kind of treating this like a riddle if we can. So eþel is over leof. We've talked about this word leof before. Leof is like dear, beloved, cherished. I think we recently had it actually in man. Over leof, over we've seen as sort of a prefix to mean highly or above. Probably not overly in this context. It's probably just like above. It could be overly though. Just over, beloved, highly cherished. And it says I huilkum men. Actually, this might be I huilchum here. I'm not sure. I'm not remembering if this actually palatalizes regardless of case, or if this is one of those that changes with case. I'm going to pronounce it I huilkum. Definitely dependent on the dialect. And this is actually another one of those formulas we've seen where we have each of men here. I huilkum men, and it's in the dative here. I huilkum, I huilk, I huilch, and if it's nominative, it's each. So each among men. The fact that this is men without... Actually, this is interesting. I've actually never thought about this. This is singular. And that is actually... Okay, either this is singular, or this is nominative or accusative plural. Like this could be dative singular, or nominative or accusative plural. Not genitive plural, which is what I would expect. I'd expect aihudkum manna. The formula is usually it has a genitive plural after it. Each of men or among men. But here we have manna is the genitive plural of men. Men is the either nominative or accusative plural, like I said, so like the subject or the object of the verb, or it's the dative singular. I think in some earlier forms of English this could also be the genitive singular. No, it cannot be. It's the dative singular. That's it. It's the I umlaut that's happening that causes man to become men. So the fact that this is singular, maybe there is an emendation needed here. I would expect this to be genitive plural. Why is it dative singular instead? I'm not sure. Because in the interpretation, I would say like that this thing, this rune, the thing that this rune's name refers to at least, is highly cherished, and I would think this is like by each person because it's dative here. It's probably like a instrumental use of the dative. We've seen that a bunch. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can make sense of this dative here. This word being dative makes sense. Dative plural. But this being dative singular, each for men, by each two men, by each four men. Because eþel has to be the subject of bith. Bith is singular. It's not men are overly beloved. Yeah, no, there's no other way to make sense of this. I think it has to be cherished by every person. It's just the overall sense. So the reason why this is in this form is a little confusing to me. And I'm not sure if maybe there's an opinion on this somewhere. I might need to consult Drekisdokter's website that I shared earlier. That might be a good place to look if there's any comments on this. But in any case, I think I'm pretty confident in still translating this as this thing is highly cherished, highly beloved by everyone. But we have an if here. If, we've seen this word before, means if he mot thar richtest an Jerizena on brukan. I think that's where like the clause would logically go. If he may, so mot here, this word motan means may, like to have the permission to do something. It could also mean like have to, but here I think it's more like a permission. If he may, or if he can. Thad is just there. Thad. Oh, someone else just said hi in the chat. Yeah, hi. I don't have enough existing knowledge to contribute to the discussion here, but I just wanted to say I'm enjoying listening. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to try my best. I try my best to kind of just explain things as I go. If I air a question, I'm not necessarily asking people to know the answer in the chat. If you do, I totally appreciate that. But I just really enjoy talking this stuff through, working this out, the Old English. And this is something that I've actually translated this stanza many times. And even then, I still haven't noticed that this is, or if I haven't noticed, I forgot that this is actually in this form, and it's strange. So, yeah, thank you for your comment. I really appreciate that. So, where was I? So, if he may, there, and then we have richtes. Oh, why does that say richter? Is that what he wrote? Oh, yeah. Okay, there is an emendation here. He wrote what looks like richter, but I think this is a very easy mistake. We've seen this kind of thing before. He wrote richter with these two R's. These are R's in the Old English sort of script that we're used to, the uncial Latin letters. If you compare that to S, you can see how it's really easy to confuse an R and an S. And I think that's what happened here, because richter makes no sense. Richtes makes all the sense. And you've probably heard me a couple times read it that way just because I know that's what it should be. Richtes is a word. Yeah, that's an emendation. I forgot. I didn't even notice because it's so easy to make that mistake. Richtes, and this word richt we've had a couple times. It means right. or at least it's the origin of right, R-I-G-H-T. And here it's what is right. I'll explain why it's S here in just a second when we get to brukan. So, richtest an yerizana on brukan. If he may, there, at that place, which kind of gives us a hint to what eþel means, probably some kind of place. If he may, there, on brukan. Brukan means to use or to like enjoy the use of or to enjoy something. Brukan. It's where we get the word brook, which is not a very commonly used word anymore. It's not a very commonly used verb. Often when I hear brook still used, in the rare cases when it is, it's usually more like put up with. But in the older meaning is to use. It's basically the English word for use. There's a couple old English words for use. Another one is neotan. I can't remember if we've seen it before, but it is a pretty common one in poetry, neotan. But brukan is also, this is like the main word for use in Old English. And the peculiar thing about this verb is that its object is in the genitive case, instead of the accusative sort of direct object case that we usually see. If something is the thing you do to the verb, or the verb to, it's usually in what we call the accusative case. It's the direct object, but this verb requires it to be genitive. So like sort of the form that we use when there's a possessor of something, or something is of something. So it's sort of make use of, enjoy the use of something. And so the thing is in the genitive. So we have, if he may there enjoy. And this on is actually kind of hard to place. I think it goes with that, like there on joy, or unless maybe this is like on brukan. I don't tend to see it transcribed that way when it's modernized, but it could be on brukan. I don't think I've seen that word before, though. This sort of prefix brukan with on. But I think it's yerizna on brukan, on bolda bladum oftast. Yeah. In any case, though, the meaning doesn't change very much whether it's the on or not. If he may there or thereon, enjoy, therein, enjoy, right, and yerizana. And yerizana, I think this is a derivation, like I said, of yerizan, which is to be fitting. And it's sort of been nounified, well, sort of adjectivified, and then you're using the adjective as a noun, like you're doing with right here. Richt is right, the adjective, like as in correct or just, or what is appropriate. And it's been made a noun, so that which is right. And that which is, so yerizan is to be fitting, so that which is fitting. And it's genitive plural, so those things which are fitting. So I would probably translate this as something like, if he may enjoy there what is right and fitting, what is right and proper, and where they enjoy that. I think there was a mistake here. I think there should be bolda here. I think I made that typo. I'm pretty sure he has bolda there. Oh, no, he doesn't. I missed another emendation. I'm really doing that a lot today. Yeah, so he writes bloda. I don't think that makes any sense. I think it's bolda. And I think everyone else agrees with me. I'm pretty sure everyone makes that emendation. If you're on the Old English Poetry Facsimile website that I link in all of these rune poetry YouTube uploads, you can actually turn this eyeball on when you're looking at the manuscript. And what it will do is it will highlight common emendations. Like you'll see the underlined overlay of, because it's probably like a compound overlay of one word. That's I think probably what they'll say if you click on it. But yeah, I'm going to click on bloda here. I should be able to click on bloda here, theoretically. I can't. But I think I have to be in the typed out version now. On the typed out version, they have these highlights as well, and you can click on those, and it opens a pop-up with like an explanation of the emendation. But 99% sure that what it's going to say, if I were to be able to click on this, is that he mixed up the O and the L. Either he mixed up the O and L, George Hicks, when he copied this, or the scribe mixed it up, or like just was writing too fast. Maybe because the very next word has a BL, they wrote a BL here. It doesn't have to be a BL to alliterate because we have brukan with BR. With B, as long as it starts with a B, with the first stressed syllable, you're golden in terms of alliterating B. The only like letter combinations that really matter is with S and a T, a P, or a C. SC only alliterates with SC. ST only alliterates with ST, and SP only alliterates with SP. Otherwise, SL can alliterate with SM. Anything goes or just with S. It's really just those three consonants after S that are considered their own thing. And there are sort of like linguistic reasons for that, but we're not going to go into this today. But yeah, the reason I keep saying bolde here is because I think pretty much everyone agrees that bolde makes sense and blode makes no sense here. And what is bolde? So a bold is a dwelling, somewhere where someone lives. And then we have bladum, and we've seen this word blad already. It means sort of like prosperity, wealth. It can mean growth, just an abundance of something. And oftast here, we've seen this word quite a bit in this collection of poems. It's sort of most often, but it could also mean continually, or continual, like happening ongoingly in some context. And that's how I think I would translate it here, is as continual. And it's describing prosperity here. Because all of this is sort of adverbial on this word brukan. How is it being enjoyed in prosperity most often, or continual prosperity is what I would say probably. So let me go over the whole thing one more time, and I'll talk about what eþel means then. So, eþel byth overleuf, I hultrum men if hemot thar richtest an gerisena on brukan on bolde bladum oftast. So, eþel is highly beloved by every person if he may enjoy there that which is right and proper in a dwelling in continual prosperity. Something like that, if we go sort of in order, word for word. I did move brukan to sort of over here, just because that's where it usually goes in modern English, but brukan is over here. So, what could this mean? This thing is overly cherished by everyone if they can enjoy what is right and proper in that dwelling in continual prosperity. So this word eþel, its most common translation is as like an estate. Some kind of property, land, particularly an estate that has lots of people working there. We read quite a few weeks back at this point now, Yereva, which was sort of that like legal-ish document about the operation of estates. Like, what were the provisions for the baker? What were the provisions for the people who tilled the soil and all that stuff? We went into that in Old English and in Modern English. And that was sort of how to run an estate. And so eþel is usually interpreted as estate here. So an estate is overly cherished, or not overly in terms of too much probably, but just highly cherished by those who can enjoy what is fitting there. If they're prosperous, it's going to be enjoyed. Now, I'm not going to go into like all the interpretations of this. I recommend that website from earlier if you want to look at someone's interpretation of this. And what I was about to say next is what someone in the chat already said. This is awesome. Yeah, I have seen some people argue that it means genetics, but they've usually got that idea from some random meme that gets shared around the witchcraft groups, and it's just a very sketchy meaning to derive it from. I agree. Genetics makes no sense for this word. So this word, eþel, in Old English, it is the sort of vowels here. I haven't really been talking much about like what letter you actually use the rune for, because we haven't really read any actual runic inscriptions yet in Old English. We've looked at some Old Norse ones, but we haven't looked at any Old English ones yet. We might eventually. I would like to. But this rune in Old English, when it does show up, it represents a long A when it comes from an earlier long O which has undergone what is called I umlaut. So there's like a front vowel that comes later that kind of drags the A to be more like an Ö. And then in Old English, at least in Standard Old English, that became just a simple A without the rounding of the lips there. In some dialects, that persisted for a bit longer, probably. Certainly the dialects where they were using this rune, because by the time it merges with A, just normal A, long A from older long A, it would probably have just been written with this rune, A, the horse rune. So it comes from probably a form eþel in Proto-Germanic, eþel, where there's like an I there, eþel. And the name that you often see for this rune when you look at like Elder Futhark is actually eþel. Eþel is another possible source. It has to do with the sort of middle vowel. Could be different because there are different sort of derivational suffixes in Proto-Germanic, and different languages choose different ones at different situations. But Old English went with the form eþel, which dragged the O to an E and it became eþel. But that word eþel really just refers to like a property. Pretty much in every context we see it in, it refers to an estate, like a physical place where the people live, and usually it has some kind of sense of either ownership or like economic relationship to it, like it's some kind of possession. I think there are some contexts in some Germanic languages where cognates of this can mean, sort of be extended poetically to mean possession. What I have never seen any kind of evidence for is that it means anything to do with like genetics. The way that Nazis have tended to interpret this is sort of like birthright or ancestry. Really, it's just the closest thing you get to birthright with this is just being handed down an estate, because estate is what it means, really. So yeah, thank you for that comment. That's exactly the direction I wanted to go. All right, so that's eþel. I was hoping we could get to the next rune as well. This will be the second and I think last one we'll get through today, because our end time is usually at the hour. So we'll see how much we can get through. This one does not have nearly as many sort of notes and addenda as this rune does, because there's just so much that goes in with this. This rune doesn't have any sort of, to my knowledge, conspicuous things to watch out for with. It's just a nice rune, and it's also a rune with a name that could maybe make it pretty easy to guess if you are familiar with some of the changes from Old English to Modern English. There is one thing, one preamble to talking about this rune that I am going to make, though. And it's that, yes, it is. I'm not going to say it yet because I like to say what the rune means after I read the stanza. I like to treat them a little bit like riddles for some of the people who are more, no, you're correct. I like to treat them like riddles a little bit so that other people can maybe have fun trying to guess it if they're not as familiar with Old English. But yes, it is a pretty transparent one from the name. It's die. D-G is how it's spelled, die. But the preamble, I was going to say, is, and I think Jackson Crawford actually mentioned this in his recent video that I mentioned earlier. He notes the names of the inscriptions. I'm forgetting the names of the inscriptions. I meant to write those down before today, but I forgot. The order, actually, of these two runes is a matter of interest. We have eþel here, and then we have die here. That is the order that they appear in our manuscript, which, reminder, our only manuscript we have for the Old English rune poems is this book by George Hicks. We do not have the original manuscript because it burnt down in a fire. So we are relying on this scholar and member of the English clergy for our source here. And this is the order he gives. This might be the order that we get in Old English. I know that there are some rune rows that appear in this order where it's eþel and die. There's some older ones in like sort of Elder Futhark that also put eþel and die. But the oldest rune rows, and I think this is what Jackson Crawford says too, the oldest rune rows actually have it go die and then eþel, or more like daras and othana, or eþel, in Proto-Germanic. So it goes D, and then this would be the last rune. Because in the Elder Futhark, this is where it ends. All of these runes that we're going to get starting next week are going to be runes that are specific to Old English. These are not used in any other... I'm going to be careful. I think some of these might be used in Frisian. I'm not as versed in Frisian runes, so I don't want to say something that's not true. But the names, at least, are unique to the sort of Anglo-Frisian runic world. They're not used in Old Norse. Now there's a rune that looks like this in Younger Futhark. We've seen it before. It is, yeah, there are Frisian runes. There's not a ton of Frisian inscriptions, but there are Frisian runes, Old Frisian. At the stage when Old Frisian was using runes and that Old English was regularly using runes, Old Frisian and Old English were also a lot more intelligible. It was just sort of Anglo-Frisian at that point. They weren't entirely the same, but they were a lot more similar to each other than they became by the time we get Old English manuscripts written in the sort of Roman alphabet. Mine is blown out. Yeah, definitely look that up. I'm not as versed in them, but they do exist. So, this symbol you'll see in Elder Futhark, or sorry, not Elder Futhark, Younger Futhark, the Old Norse ones. But there, it's actually their equivalent of, where is it? This rune. In the Younger Futhark, this rune, which is Heil in Old English, it's Hagal, Hagal in Old Norse. I was trying to stop myself from pronouncing it Hagat, like it's modern Icelandic or something, Hagat. But yeah, Hagal is, yeah. In the Elder Futhark, it's usually this H, but with one bar instead of two. But in Younger Futhark, it ends up looking like this, like exactly like this rune. But in Old English, this is a different rune. So that's easy to confuse. Now, in some intermediary stages between Elder Futhark and Younger Futhark in Proto-Norse, this actually gets used instead as a variant of what is in Elder Futhark this rune, which is etymologically the equivalent of this rune. This rune is Os. This is the fourth one that we read. This space, though, in the rune rows in terms of order, is actually usually in Proto-Germanic this would be Ansuz. It's Os in Old Norse, and it looks like this in Elder Futhark actually. But there's some intermediate stages where it looks like this, which is confusing if you're more familiar with the Younger Futhark, where this is H and not an A sound. And if you're familiar with Old English, where this is this rune instead. But yeah, all of these after die are going to be sort of special to Old English. You won't see these in Elder Futhark. Definitely won't see these in Younger Futhark, which is going to be what the rune poems that we read in Norwegian and Icelandic are. Because there is no rune poem for the Elder Futhark, but we do have sort of lists, alphabet lists of it. And in the earliest alphabet lists, die comes first, eþel comes second. And Jackson Crawford uses this as one of his pieces of evidence that that the rune's direct source might be some variant of the ancient Greek alphabet, because this rune kind of very transparently, in my opinion, looks like it comes from omega, and omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. It's not the last letter of the Etruscan or sort of Old Italic scripts usually when they're written out, which is, I don't think there are that many. I'm not as familiar with the archaeology on the Old Italic scripts, but I know that when we do see them written out, I don't think I've ever seen it with omega at the end, but because they usually don't even include omega. But if this is more originally at the end, after die, like it's the last rune, it comes last, omega comes last. Obviously, this order here, Futhark, all the other parts of the order are a little confusing. The order of the runes is a little bit of a mystery. Like, why is it in the order that it is? Because it is not very reflective of the Greek or the Latin or the Etruscan or the Phoenician even alphabet. So, yeah, it's an open matter of research there of why. Okay, I said we'd actually read this stanza, so let's do it. It's die. I think I'm zoomed in enough. Okay. Die bedrichtnis sand, deora mannum, mara methodes leucht, mirth antohicht, adgum and armum alum breacha. Okay. So, let me think about, are there any emendations I need to make? I guess the only thing is, tohicht might be one word there. And breacha is probably a variant of, it's kind of the opposite of what happened up here. It's probably a variant of, breacha here with u, because it's actually related to brukan. And when the u umlauts, which is what's happening here, it becomes u, this vowel. But like I said, in later Old Saxon, especially this kind of non-standard variety that we've been seeing, it the I and the Y kind of get mixed up sometimes. So that's kind of a hint, foreshadowing of what this means. But die bedrichtnis sand. A sand is something that is sent. It's a send. Send is the verb, sendan. Sand, it could be spelled with an A or an O. A lot of the time A gets spelled O before an N, suggesting that it was probably like raised a bit, like from ah to like aw, maybe. In some dialects it's not uniform, but etymologically it's an A. Sand. That which is sent is sand. So this thing is the thing that's sent. Usually it means a message. It's a message, or it could be a gift, maybe. And then drichten, we've seen this word plenty of times, is lord. So drichtnes is lords. And we see again this I versus Y thing. Sure. This thing, die, is the Lord's thing sent, message, gift. Deora mannum. We have dear. It's another way of saying dear instead of leof. We could say deora. Deora mannum. Dear, it is dear to men. Dear to people. It's dear to people. Mara means sort of famous, widely known. It has some other meanings depending on the context. I think we've seen this before in one of our riddles that we did way back when. But here, it's sort of like widespreadly aware of. I would translate this as something like eminent, like it is widely dispersed. It is a widely dispersed leucht. Leucht is light. Methodes leucht. Method. This is a word that in most Old English literature, given the Christian nature of most Old English literature, usually refers to God, just like drichten often refers to God. Method, if you kind of go etymologically, it's related to the word metan, which is to measure, to sort of do the math on, to sort of measure the dimensions of, or to craft something carefully. So method means like a measurer, one who measures. It's not a productive derivation from metan. You can't like make other sort of words like this in Old English, but it comes from that root here. So it often gets, if people are trying to be like very peculiar to the etymology when they're translating, they'll call this measurer. Also, if they want to avoid in like assuming that a stanza is Christian, just because it uses words that become associated with Christianity. As we've said, this rune poem might be very old, despite our copy of it, the spelling and stuff suggesting it's very late. The content, the context makes it seem, especially given that it's about runes, makes some people think that it's the original version that this is a descendant of was probably old, maybe even predating the sort of takeover of Christianity throughout all of the Anglo-Saxon speaking world, the Old English speaking world. So people will sometimes just translate this as measurer, but in a Old English context, it probably means God. It's the eminent light of God, of the measurer. And then we have mirth an tohicht. We've had tohicht before. It's hope. And hicht by itself also means hope. And then mirth we've had as well. It's where we get the word mirth from. It's joy. It's that which, it's like merriment. Mir is merry. and then mirth is merriment, joy. Joy and hope. And we've had this this double a few times as well in these poems. We've had Adum and Admum. Adi means wealthy. It's another way of saying wealthy. And then Admum we've seen as well. Adam means poor. So to the wealthy and the poor. To the rich and poor. And then it's Alum Bricha. Now, I mentioned earlier Bricha is related to Brukan. Brukan means to enjoy or to use. Bricha is that which is useful. It is help. It's another way of saying help. There is the Old English word help, which we've seen a few times. It's where we get the word help from. But Bricha is another way of saying like that which comes in handy, that which is helpful. It's help. And it's a help. Alum. Alum. It's a help to all. So, Dai is the Lord's gift, the Lord's message. Dear to all men, the eminent light of the measurer, joy and hope to rich and poor, a help to all. So what this thing is, Dai, if you weren't able to guess, it's day. Someone in the chat said that earlier. It's day. It's the day rune. And that is what it means. It means day. So the day is the Lord's gift. What the Lord sends us is the day. It's dear to man, all men, all people. Reminder, man doesn't have the same gendered bent that it doesn't in modern English. It can just mean people. Although we also see words for men specifically being used generically throughout Old English literature. So, dear to everyone, the eminent, the famous, the eminent light of the measurer, a joy and hope to rich and poor, and a help to all. The day is helpful. It's helpful when it's day because you can do things that you need to do outside. And, yeah, that's Dai. And that is all I have planned for today. We went a couple minutes over, but I was also very late today, so sorry about that. Thank you for everyone who came. I really appreciated all the comments. Anytime there's questions, I love to address those as well. And thank you for showing up. The recording will be up on YouTube pretty soon, and it will have the link to that website that I shared earlier from Drekisdóttir about the rune poem interpretations and lots of links to other rune resources, including an article I wrote about rune divination sources. So definitely check that out. It will be an hour or so-ish before it's up on YouTube. And if you're newer here, definitely check out the YouTube channel. And if you have time and the inclination, definitely check it out and see the past streams. Drekisdóttir is good people, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. And we'll be back around the same time next week. It's 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific, so whatever that time that is for you, that's when we usually do this stream. We'll be finishing up, hopefully, or getting through a few of these Old English-specific rune stanzas, and then we'll be doing some Gothic, and then we'll come back to rune poems in Norwegian or Icelandic. I haven't decided which one we're doing first. So thank you for everyone who came. Thank you for anyone in the future watching this stream. Archive upload on YouTube, and have a great rest of whatever time zone you're in. What's Pacific time to British summertime? Oh gosh, yeah, that's tricky because of summertime. If it weren't summertime, I would know, but I can't remember if it's backwards or forwards. I'm UTC -8 is what it is for Pacific time. So look that up and then apply the changes accordingly, I think. So, whatever time it is now, the stream starts an hour ago for you, weekly. If you're in British, 9 hours behind me then, 4 a.m. for you. Oh, no, okay. Good. People are trying to do math. I'm so sorry I made that happen. People are trying to do time zone math. Speaking of time zones, have a great rest of whatever time zone it is for you. Now, have a great evening, night, morning, afternoon, whatever it is when you're watching this. Thank you, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Goodbye.